All right, chat. So I'm a little late to the party on this one. This is the debate between Tim Walz and JD Vance, the vice presidential debate. I wanted to react to this with you guys when it was happening live, but you know, Tippy's got a normie like 9-to-5 job, and after work, Tippy was just hella tired. So I was like, you know what? We'll do this tomorrow. I'm just going to sleep. So we're a little bit late to the game on this one, but that's okay. We're going to dive into this. I actually haven't watched this yet. The only thing I have seen on social media, because I've been mostly avoiding the clips. Obviously, I'm scrolling through my feed and clips are going by, but I'm not watching them. The only clip I did see is like a moment that Tim Walz, like very obviously misspoke. And like, the right is trying to use that as some like weird gotcha moment against Tim Walz. Like, they're so desperate to get a gotcha that they're going to go for this like moment where he obviously misspoke and try to use that against him. But we'll elaborate on that a little bit more when we get to that point. Before we actually watch the debate though, I wanted to show you this that I saw on social media because I thought it was like utter insanity. We got this Raw Alerts Twitter account. Breaking: Trump supporters are now throwing tampons at Palestine and Kamala Harris supporters outside the CBS studios where the JD Vance and Tim Walz are debating. Throwing tampons at Kamala Harris supporters because they think the tampon Tim thing is such a funny meme or whatever, which is ridiculous. As the highly anticipated debate between JD Vance and Tim Walz kicks off at CBS Studios in Manhattan, New York, things are starting to escalate between Trump supporters and Kamala Harris supporters who have gathered to voice their opinions. The situation grows as some Trump supporters resort to throwing tampons, symbolizing their frustration, while also engaging in heated verbal exchanges, creating a charged atmosphere as both sides face off over deeply divisive political and international issues amidst the growing crowd. Video by Scooter Caster, New York. Okay, let's go ahead and let's take a look at this.
What the fuck is that? They'll throw you right off a building. Right off a fucking building. USA! 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 Free Palestine! USA! 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 USA!
And these people wonder why we think that they're like freaks. Like, so they shit on like Tim Walz because he basically passed some legislation in his state that he governs over where like they're providing like free access to tampons to people who use like public restrooms and stuff, which I think is like a good thing. But they mock him for it, which I think is very bizarre, but whatever.
I'm gonna throw you off the building. Bitch.
Not her so much.
You
she ain't
dumb
so pretty.
bitch.
You, they love you over
That's
there.
right, you dumb bitch. That tampon's for you. You dumb bitch.
Not her so much.
That's not even a man.
You got better. You
That's
got better.
not even a man.
Oh, okay. Got it. Transphobia, of course.
Where's your fucking gay friends? Where's your little gay friends? Where are they? Your little gay friends? Are you gay? I'd fuck the shit out of you. He's kind of cute.
a warmonger.
What the fuck? What? Hold on.
Are you gay? I'd fuck the shit out of you. He's kind of cute.
a warmonger.
I'd fuck the shit out. That's really fucking creepy and weird. What the fuck?
Ugly bitch. Ugly dumb bitch.
Yeah,
They would beat the shit out of you.
You're an ugly dumb bitch, but I would fuck the shit out of you, he says. Okay, my guy.
Palestine.
Give me a good policy
Come
for
talk to
Kamala,
my
can you?
Come
Got
talk
the
to
insult
my
you
uncle.
got, ha
These fucking MAGA Trumples think they wonder why we all think they're weird, like why the whole weird thing caught on. It's because of dipshits like this guy.
He'd rape the shit out of you. And then fuck.
Wait, what? Hold on, what?
ha.
He'd rape the shit out of you. And then fuck.
Let's talk about what? There's no way I actually heard that right now.
Can you?
Come
Got the
talk to my
insult you
uncle.
got, ha
He'd rape the shit out of you. And then fuck.
Raped? Wow.
Throw your boyfriend off the roof. That's what they'd do.
Okay, so anyway, that's insanity. But anyway, we're here to watch the debate, okay? I have not seen this yet. I know a lot of you in chat probably have already seen it. I have not watched it yet, other than that one clip that I kind of alluded to before, which when that moment happens in the debate, we'll elaborate on it. But let's go ahead and let's dive into this. Without further ado, here we go.
With just over a month to go until Election Day, the first and only meeting between
Let me know if the audio is okay, chat, if I need to like turn it up or down or anything.
two men who hope to become vice president of the United States. Democratic Governor Tim Walz
He's saying how Hamas and Hezbollah, excuse me, would do that, not him. Not that it matters much. I mean, yeah, like no matter who he was saying would do it, it's just really fucked up.
Walz of Minnesota and Republican Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio.
Now, this is likely the final debate of this election cycle, and voting is already underway in 20 states.
Yeah, because Trump refuses to do another debate with Kamala. Kamala has been like challenging his ass to do another one. He refuses. He's a little crybaby bitch.
CBS News polling shows this remains a race either presidential candidate could win. The CBS News vice presidential debate starts now.
Fight for every single vote, and we're going to take this country back.
And we are ready to continue to build the future together.
We're going to turn this whole country red with President Donald J. Trump's leadership.
You know what's at the end of this little journey? Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States.
This is a CBS News special, live from CBS News headquarters in...
So, chat, again, I haven't seen this yet, so no spoilers, please, but just kind of like a brief sort of temperature check in the room for those of you guys who have already seen the debate. Like, if you could rate this debate on a scale of like 1 to 10 in terms of like the performances of the candidates during the debate, what would you rate this? Would you say that this was like a pretty good debate, somewhere in the 10-ish range, or like a not so great debate, more towards the 1-ish level? I'm genuinely interested to see what you guys think.
New York, America decides. The vice presidential debate.
Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, another network.
Pretty good. I thought about an 8, I guess. Somebody says poor performance. I don't know. I can say 6 out of 10. Okay. Gotcha.
Here in the U.S. and around the world.
100 out of 10 for Walz. Vance is more like a negative 30 out of 10. Jeez, that bad, huh?
We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Ohio's Republican Senator J.D. Vance tonight meeting for the first time.
Here we go.
I'm Margaret Brennan. In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the...
Okay, we got the handshake. The camera didn't switch, so you couldn't really see it. You just caught the tail end of it. But we got the handshake. We all saw what happened with, like, you know, Kamala and Trump, where Trump wasn't going to shake her hand, but she went in for it. So, kind of asserted dominance in a way. Like, you will shake my hand. Obviously, I'm, like, hyping it up a little bit more. But, like, yeah, it looked like Trump wasn't going to shake her hand. So they both went for it on this one. Okay.
Rules that
so
both
very cordial
campaigns
from the
have
start.
agreed to.
Fair enough.
Questions will be directed at one candidate, who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with...
Rory in the chat says, I'll be honest, Vance comes off as semi-normal, but not normal for me. Yeah.
The Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed.
Uber says it was like watching a pre-2016 debate. Yeah, I'm hearing that this wasn't the typical, like, you know, verbal slugging match that you expect with, like, Donald Trump, for example, where he makes a spectacle out of everything. Like, everything was, like, very cordial with this one, apparently.
Thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically...
Chasing Domi says, I can't unsee human Chucky. I can't, like, I never looked at JD Vance that way, but ever since you said it, he really do be looking like an older version of Chucky.
Reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the...
I mean, we pretty much expected that, right? I mean, America's foreign policy, especially in regards to, you know, these particular conflicts, is not great. So, like, this doesn't surprise me at all.
Humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago, a nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is there.
Fafa says Joe Biden has cucked the whole conversation because the candidate is his VP and he's an ideological Zionist. Yeah, I mean, for sure. Weapons are like our only export. Weapons are like our only export anymore. Thank you for the Twitch sub. I appreciate it.
Became a Twitch subscriber.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry for being late, but I am happy to be here.
No worries. Thank you for the Twitch sub, and thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
It's dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together. Understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the vice president said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same.
I'll say this, like, I heard somewhere that, like, they were saying that apparently, like, Tim Walz was admitting he was a little bit nervous about the debate because he doesn't view himself as, like, a very good debater or something along those lines. And you could definitely see there's a little bit of, like, shakiness in a lot of his statements or whatever. But, I mean, all things considered, he's not performing that bad. Obviously, like, his position on these particular issues I'm not super fond of. But, you know, for somebody who openly admits he was a little bit nervous for this thing, like, he's doing all right so far.
Question, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods.
Oh, we know who you are. You're the weird couch fucker guy. We know you very well. Okay, you're the guy who, like, tried to do one of those, like, press appearances at a local business, and you were like, you made ordering donuts look awkward. Like, how bad do you have to be at trying to act normal that you can't order fucking donuts without it being awkward? Like, holy shit.
Of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me, and she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill
the eating dogs
after
and
I
cats
enlisted in
guy.
the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops.
I mean, it's kind of true. Like, if you look back at, like, Donald Trump's, like, administration and the way he, like, ran the country, I feel like he spent more time on fucking Twitter just, like, making an ass of himself than actually accomplishing much of anything. But, yeah.
And they received traumatic brain injuries. Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack?
Sometimes it looks like it really hits Vance how evil his party actually is. Oh my God, that's pretty funny. You know, like, he literally kind of does have like the vibe of like, obviously this isn't like a serious statement or anything. We're just kind of like having a few laughs or whatever. But he literally does look like the stereotypical like villain in like a movie, doesn't he? He just has that vibe.
Israel, it was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane, because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of two grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives.
Damn, chasing dopamine, trying to roast for the voice crack. Look, as somebody who has GERD, and because of that, I voice crack pretty regularly. How are you going to roast them, but then you're going to watch me and listen to my voice cracks constantly? Like, chill the fuck out. Lighten up.
And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people. Our prayers go out to them. And we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible. And then, of course, afterwards, to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job. And I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about...
I mean, that is true. Like, if you look at all the research into it, like, that absolutely is true. The fuck?
Weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America, because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane. And my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together. So all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover, but we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen,
I think that's like the craziest thing that I look at when I look at like JD Vance and Donald Trump is like you look at Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, and they're both on the same page with a lot of their like policy positions and stuff. But we've seen multiple instances where like JD Vance will say something that Trump is not in agreement with. We even saw it in the debate where I forget the specifics of it. Somebody in chat will probably remember, but there was something that Donald Trump said, and like one of the panelists informed them, well, that's JD said you said this. It's like, well, look, JD might believe that, but that's not something like I'm in agreement with or something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the specifics. Like I said, I'm sure someone in chat will remember. But like, it seems like there's multiple occasions there where Vance and Trump are not on the same page, which just seems like such a dysfunctional like VP pick. Why would you pick somebody who's not on the same page as you?
Seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500...
Al DeGeneres says he picked him purely because he won't certify. You think that's the case? You think that's why? Because like, we all saw like how pissed off he was at, Mike Pence for the way things played out on J6. So maybe you've got something there. I don't know.
year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing.
Oh, we have somebody in the chat, Daisy Ferret, who apparently was affected by the hurricane. Better now. I'm one of those hit by the hurricane. Just got power back yesterday. Damn. I'm genuinely like sorry that like you're affected by this. I've seen a few content creators of mine that I really enjoy watching who've been affected by this. Like one of the ones that comes to mind immediately is LGR, Lazy Game Reviews. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He does like retro computer reviews and like retro game reviews and stuff. It's a really fun channel. If you're into that sort of thing, highly recommend it. But yeah, apparently like his house got like, there were some trees that hit his house and destroyed his like roof and stuff. Like it's really sad. But yeah, I'm really sorry you were impacted by that. We're mostly okay. No flooding in my neighborhood. Oh, well, that's good. And I'm glad you got power back.
Our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do.
He said himself he wouldn't have certified the 2020 election. Oof.
Do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond.
Thank you. We had water the whole time. Would have been awful without it. Yeah, it's been crazy to see like how many people who've been without electricity or without like water. Local supplies are like running low, and then like obviously the people who are dealing with like flooding and damage to their homes and stuff like that. Like my heart genuinely goes out to those people. It's really, really unfortunate.
On there, the governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said.
No, that's not what Trump said. I mean, maybe in some capacity he said something along those lines, but he has literally stated that it's a hoax. So it's another like non-answer basically. They specifically asked, what do you think about like Donald Trump saying that like this was a hoax, or do you agree with him? And he just kind of like did this like subtle deflection of it. Basically like, no, this is what like Trump actually said. No, like it's on record. He has said he thinks it's a hoax.
I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars.
No stores to replace food, ruined by no power in the fridge. Some are open now, but staples are hard to find. Yeah, I can only imagine like how difficult that must be. Jeez.
Of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China. Number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility.
He really failed to give any direct answers. I mean, should we be surprised that he's playing by the same playbook that Donald Trump has? I mean, there shouldn't be any surprise there, honestly.
I think one in the past 40 years.
Senator.
Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing
Senator,
worse by the climate.
your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil. But the folks know, and like I said, again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our number one export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed.
Ellen DeGeneres says green energy would reduce demand for fossil fuels. This decreases prices. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's all I see from it, honestly. I just noticed Vance's tie is red and Walz's blue. I love it. That is all. It's so funny. Like, we're listening to these like politicians like talk about like their policies that they plan to implement when they get elected, and Chasing Dopamine's just like, oh, how cute. The Democrat has a blue tie and the Republican has a red tie. Oh my This is why I love you, Chasing Dopamine.
Allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that, and an all-above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming.
Daisy Ferris says, I wish Walz was my dad. He really does seem like the type of guy that, like, if I were still a drinker, like, I can go to the bar and grab a beer with him. I'll grab a sody pop with him since I don't drink anymore. Let's go to the local ice cream shop and let's grab a root beer float. I've seen clips of him enjoying ice cream. Me and Tim Walz, root beer float. You down for that? He doesn't know who the fuck I am.
At an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so.
Jeez.
Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens.
Because all his like border policy was let's build a fucking wall on the southern border. Something he like failed to do anyway. Like, what the fuck? Like, that's the dumbest fucking idea ever.
Massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction. And
I don't think Trump and Vance get along. The only reason Trump liked Pence is because Pence wouldn't steal Trump's spotlight. Trump hates people stealing his attention. Oh, yeah, 100%.
Has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn.
Chasing Dopamine says, I low-key miss trumpets. If you say Trump Pence fast, it's trumpets. I love you so much, Dopamine. Like, oh my God, I love you so much.
Stop being such a little gay homo queer.
Earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Oh, you wish they would do that for sure. Oh yeah, you wish they would do that. Let's just build the stupid freaking wall. Yeah.
Governor, Do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history. 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the...
Corey saying, Trump saying, I have concepts of a plan when it comes to healthcare means fucking nothing. He has no plan, just privatization and price hikes. Yeah, there were so many like quotable moments, right, from the Trump and Kamala debate. Like there were so many like noteworthy quotable moments that are just going to like forever like become like memes, you know, forever ingrained in history, right? So far we haven't gotten any of those like memorable moments from this particular debate. Nothing like super like noteworthy to kind of like mock or poke fun at or whatever. I'm hoping we get something like that. But so far it's just been pretty straight shooter. Here's my policy positions, here's my rebuttals, etc. And very cordial in comparison to, you know, Trump versus Harris.
The Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him to, what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these?
Yeah, exactly. Like there were so many things that were like agreed upon on both sides of the issue on that particular bill. And like Trump wanted to be able to use that as like leverage for his campaign for like his voters, and he wouldn't be able to do that if that thing passed. So he literally told them to shoot it down.
These things, and they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years.
Vance doesn't understand the difference in powers of the president versus the vice president. Yeah, that's a common like insult that you'll see a lot of conservatives give, you know, Kamala Harris is like, oh, well, she says she's going to do all these like great things. Why isn't she doing them now? It's like, well, she's like the vice president. I'm sure that she can give some kind of advice, obviously, to the president above her, in this case, like Joe Biden. But like, she doesn't have the level of authority that like, you know, the president would have at the moment. But, you know.
He had 4 years to do this.
That's a common insult they use.
America,
yeah.
How easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill.
Thanks
she'll
for the
sign
money,
it.
you fucking
Governor, your time
Thank
is
you.
up.
Senator gave a
question was,
$25
will you
donation.
separate
Thank
These
you.
debates are exciting. D.
Yeah, I really did enjoy the last one, obviously, between Trump and Harris. This one's been pretty, like I said, there's not a whole lot of like noteworthy moments that took place in this one so far. We're about 25 minutes in so far. This one's been pretty civil and pretty low key.
parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens. You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to.
Tori in the chat says vice presidents usually only have the tie-breaking vote on bills that Senate and Congress can't agree on. Interesting. Good to know.
stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had
Thanks for reading my last donation. Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this, and Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community.
That was nuts to me when he did that interview. Who was the interview with again? That was the CNN one, right? He did that interview where he literally admitted to like fabricating stories just to bring attention to like these issues and basically push the agenda against them that he wants. Like, that was nuts. Then that was in regards to the whole, Haitians are eating like people's pets and stuff like that. It was wild.
Community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true. Don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford.
Yeah, Dana Bash. That's the one. We reacted to it on stream previously.
Did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our border czar, Kamala Harris, has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio...
I mean, rightfully so. You've spread literal misinformation that has resulted in bomb threats and other like threats of attack against that community based on like literal lies that you admitted that you fabricated to push a narrative. So like, come on, what the fuck?
And in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in
But the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio are not illegal immigrants. They're legally there. Like, what the fuck?
Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't...
Because if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, chat, but like the Haitian community in Springfield, Ohio, they're legally there as asylum seekers, right?
I think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us, you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important
we're
because
going to turn now to the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me.
Oh. Wait, what? He's mad because he got fact checked? No! Okay, we have our first noteworthy moment of the debate, chat.
Oh, shit! Oh, shit!
He's mad because he got fact checked. Oh, God.
Let's keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator.
Wait, he's like, wait, you're not going to let me just lie? You're not going to let me say dishonest things without getting checked?
We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think
oh my God, that's so fucking funny.
Nice argument. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
That's hilarious. Oh, God.
Important
we're
because
going to turn now to the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that
The rules are lie and get to lie with impunity. Yeah.
You guys weren't going to fact check. And since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own
Thank you, Senator, for
leadership.
describing the legal process. We have
Kamala
so much to get to, Senator.
Those
We have
laws
so
have been
much.
on the books since 19.
Yeah, thank you for describing the process that literally backs up our statement that those people are legally there. That's fucking hilarious. He's so mad that he got corrected. The guy's coping. You know what? I think you're right. That is pretty big cope.
You are coping
Oh my God.
You just can't accept what you see.
Wait, you're not supposed to fact check me. You're just supposed to let me lie and get away with it. Oh no.
Now you are molding and coping.
Oh my God.
So hard.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Oh my God.
1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
we want to have.
app is not.
The governor of Ohio and local Springfield officials have said that they're working on fixing issues like overwhelmed schools and hospitals and educating Haitian immigrants so they can get licenses. Yeah.
Been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process.
They basically like professionally told them, shut the fuck up. I like how like with, you know, the Trump and Harris like debate, like when they would cut the mics, you can very vaguely hear something, but not that much. But you can kind of hear him like subtly in the background coping even more. Oh my God.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
we
CBP
want to have.
One app has not been on the books since 1990.
You even see her reach for like, you see her reach to cut the mic. Watch that.
90.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
we
CBP
want to have.
One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that
Oh, maybe not. Never mind.
created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret. The economy
that's so
is
funny.
a top concern for voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you...
I mean, honestly, like that would be great, you know, if that actually helped like people be able to actually get a house, because let me tell you, like right now, like I have a good paying job. Plus, I do this, you know, on the side. I don't make a ton of money doing this, but like I make decent money. Okay, like I have a career, and like I have like a side hustle that I'm able to use to make a little extra money on the side. But like even someone like in my position, I couldn't even begin to dream of owning a home in the current state of the housing market. Like it would be impossible for someone like me to even think about purchasing a home. So that would be really nice if they actually work towards ways to like make, you know, the affordability of housing like a lot better. This is something like I'm genuinely interested in, because it could be something where like, you know, I go from, hey, you know, I don't mind renting. Owning a home is just like too unattainable at the moment. So it's not something that's like a priority to me, to the point where like, hey, you know, maybe home ownership can be possible in my future. So I'm interested to see how that plays out.
Buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it, it would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do. We'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best, more people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer, a lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do. And some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies, and what she's...
That seems to be like their sole strategy right now, is like literally like pointing to the fact that Kamala Harris is the VP and she's not already doing what she's talking about. And it's just like, I don't know if that strategy is going to play too well for them. Like, I feel like most people know well enough that she's not in a position of authority at the moment to make those kind of calls. So like, I don't know if this move is going to play as well for them as I think it is.
Actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%, open the American southern border, and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such
He can't admit that the vice president does nothing because he's running for vice president. Yeah, pretty much.
great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the
I mean, like, realistically speaking, like, vice president is just a placeholder position. It's basically like, heaven forbid anything happen to you while you're in office, but if anything does, I take over if something happens to you. Like, that's really all it is. You know, there's some things that they get done, but it's not as much as, you know, the Republicans are trying to make it out to be at the moment.
American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust.
I feel a future VP should know what the VP does. Yeah, but I mean, like, it's clear to me that they're trying to, like, put these thoughts into people's heads that don't know any better on what the role of, like, a VP is. So, like, they know that they're selling a line of bullshit to the American people, but they're hoping that the American people are dumb enough to buy it. That's what they're hoping for.
Her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security.
Literally, the only real enshrined power that the vice president has is breaking ties in the Senate. Yeah, pretty much. And I mean, like, I would imagine they serve as sort of like an advisory type role to the president, meaning like if somebody's, if the president is seeking like advice, like, what do you think on this policy or this position or whatever, they can ask their like VP for advice. But I mean, like, they don't really need to have that as like an official role. They could really like do that with anybody, right? Just kind of like, hey, you know, this is something that, you know, I'm thinking might be a good idea for the country. What do you think about that sort of thing? But yeah, realistically speaking, the VP is, as you said, just a tiebreaker for those sorts of instances. And then also they're just a placeholder. You know, heaven forbid something happened to the president where they're not able to serve their country in their elected role, then the vice president takes over. That's really just that's it.
All over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say, look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans.
Socio Hart says it's working. I've tried easing my landlord away from a lot of this fear-mongering bullshit, but he takes anything he sees on Fox as gospel. Oh my God. Anytime like Fox News gets mentioned, I already check out. Like that, anybody who like watches Fox News and buys the bullshit that they sell on there, like they're a lost cause at this point. Ow, fuck. Ow.
Is that a lot of those?
Hold on a second.
2 days later.
So chat, what happened after the last stream? Why are we here again? What is it? 2 days later, watching the same debate that we didn't get to finish last time. For those of you guys who tuned in live, I had the worst like leg cramp I have ever had in my life. It just kind of hit me randomly in the middle of the fucking stream. We were about a half an hour into reacting to the VP debate, and then I just had the worst like leg cramp ever, where I could not continue watching the debate. So I ended the stream early, and I was like, you know what? We'll finish this next time we come back to the stream. So here we are. Here we are. And I'm actually going to be doing some gaming while reacting to the debate for the rest of this, because I got to be honest, this debate in comparison to the one between, you know, Kamala Harris and, you know, Donald Trump, this one's kind of dry in comparison, okay? It doesn't have all the funny, noteworthy moments that we had with the last one. So far, we only had really one moment where basically JD Vance got pissed that he got fact-checked or whatever. But outside of that, we don't have a lot of the funny moments, at least not so far, that we had with the last debate that we reacted to. So we're going to be doing some gaming while we continue this debate, but that's what happened, okay? If you're wondering why 2 days later we're back to this debate again, that's why. We didn't get to finish it because Tippy had a really bad leg cramp. Note to self, do not drink shit tons of caffeine during the day. It leads to really, really, really bad leg cramps later, and we don't want that. So, all right, chat, let me go ahead and bring this up, and we'll get right into the debate, and then I'll get the game going in a second here. So here we go.
Doesn't make sense. I say, look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris?
I mean, I don't understand how, like, his plan is going to help anybody, if I'm being completely honest, chat. Because, like, what was his whole thing? His whole thing was, I'm just going to tariff, like, everything, okay? And whether, like, we like to acknowledge it or not, as Americans, a lot of our consumables comes from other countries, okay? So if Donald Trump's answer to, like, the deficit and whatnot is, hey, let's just tariff every fucking thing that comes into our country, like, that cost, that added cost has to go somewhere. It's not like these companies are going to be, you know, gracious and be like, oh, look, we're just not going to add additional cost, even though we have to pay these tariffs. We're not going to add additional costs onto the goods that we sell to the consumers. We're just going to be like nice guys. Like, that's not going to happen. Those costs get passed down to the consumer, which is going to result in higher rates on a lot of the goods that we buy in this country. So, like, I don't understand how his policies are going to help us in the long run. They're just not.
Has done for the middle class.
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID.
Tori in the chat says, I fucking hate when these Republicans bring up common sense because common sense is about feelings, not facts. I mean, not only that, but, like, the kind of the brand of common sense that they have is not based in reality. Okay, like you can show data to, like, debunk so much of the shit that they repeatedly try to push, and, like, it doesn't matter how much data you have to back up your position. Like, it's just common sense that this is happening, but the data doesn't say that. But common sense, though. Like, a perfect example of this is, like, the stupid stuff that they said was going on in Springfield, Ohio, with, like, the Haitians eating people's pets and shit like that. And you can show them numerous, like, things that debunk it. Like, no, all signs point to no, that's not happening. And they're just like, but common sense says that it is because reasons. So it's literally like the source meme.
Nice argument. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Pretty much.
In a
What's up, Miss Genderlin?
Recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one. Whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security.
How's my leg? Honestly, it's still a little bit sore. Like, it's not cramping anymore, and I'm pretty confident that that's not going to happen again, because I think what happened that day is I had tons of caffeine. Tons and tons and tons of caffeine, which, if you know anything about caffeine, if you have too much of it, it could potentially lead to stuff like that, like muscle cramps and whatnot. I had a shit ton of caffeine that day. Didn't drink much water that day either, which is no bueno. So, yeah, I think that's what happened. But, yeah, I'm good. I'm good now.
Folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota.
Chasing Dopamine says you're not deep throating enough bananas. Is that what you want, Dopamine? Do you want me to deep throat bananas? Do you want me to do some YouTube shorts of me deep throating some bananas? You'd like that, wouldn't you? I'm sure you would.
And not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, or whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years? And the last year as president. That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had...
Yeah, and Trump's answer to that is, okay, let's just tariff everything that comes into the country so we can drive up the prices of everything we buy again. Like, again, it's the most ridiculous response to this, to try and act like, oh, like we're trying to help, you know, the middle class too. And it's like, no, you're only going to hurt us more. So I feel like tariffs are like why we had the Boston Tea Party. I guess you could kind of look at it that way. Yeah.
The wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff.
Heathen Granny 666 says, there's tons of neo-Nazis in the country running wild, and guess what? 8 years of Obama didn't bring us this. 4 years of Trump did. Yeah, true. Trump really polarized politics in ways that I don't think politics has been polarized in a long fucking time.
And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
If you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to.
Is that true? Is like Donald Trump's like economic policy polling higher than Kamala's? Because again, I don't understand how his economic policy. I guess if you're like, maybe like you're a voter who's not super in the know on like what he, because his whole way that he's positioning is just like, oh, you know, I'm not going to tax the people. I'm just going to tariff all the, you know, the goods that come into our country. And I guess if you don't look at the bigger picture there, like that sounds good. Like, oh, you know, instead of us having to pay more taxes, people who import goods into our country, they'll have to pay more taxes. And like on the surface, that sounds great and all. But again, when you realize that results in increased price of goods, that's just going to hurt you in the long run. You may not be paying that money in taxes, but in the long run, like you're going to be paying that in like higher costs of goods. So yeah, it just doesn't make sense.
Ship things overseas, but I understand that. Look,
yeah, it trickles down to us.
Soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are
asking about Project 2025. I'll say this: so I still haven't watched this debate off stream. I wanted to save my reaction for on stream. So even though we ended early the other day, I didn't watch the rest of it on my own. I saved it for you guys. But you know, without spoiling too much, does Project 2025 get mentioned here? Politicians should have less free speech. Any public statement should be treated like they're under oath in court. Damn, that's pretty intense.
Venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
Your daughter just wrote a paper in her high school on Project 2025. That's awesome.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics show that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like.
He's like trying to pin like decisions on her as if like she's the one making the decisions to run the country right now, and she's not. We talked about this like the other day, that like realistically, like the vice presidential role is more of like it's like a what is it, it's a placeholder position. I talked about that, how essentially like all the vice president does, they make some public appearances and stuff, and they could provide some kind of advice to the president or whatnot. But in terms of like what do they actually do, they're just a placeholder. You know, heaven forbid anything happen to the president, but if something does, then they just take over. Yeah, an advisor. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. But yeah, so it's really crazy that that's the move that they're making. That's the play they're making in this. Trump as well as JD Vance here, is they're like blaming her for like what they perceive as like wrongs being done in the country at the moment, like bad decisions that are being made, and she's not the one making those decisions. So it's really, really fucking weird. Biden is coming to town tomorrow. Interesting. Why? What's up? By the way, what's up, Gaming Giant Live?
Like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
VP also approves the election. Yeah, and then also what was it? We said that for votes that are like really close, they serve as like the tiebreaker as well. Yeah.
I hope we have a conversation on healthcare then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly, Tori.
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions.
Yeah.
We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people working on things like farm bills that we got.
Walz kind of stumbled with this part. Yeah, there's another part where he like misspeaks, and like the conservatives were all over that shit to try and make it in a thing, and like anybody with even only 2 brain cells to rub together could see like he misspoke. It's whatever. It's not that big of a deal. But they were all over that shit. We'll get to that. I'll elaborate on it a little more when we get to that part. But yeah, it was just insane how much they try to jump all over that shit. Yeah.
Got done working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything. Many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate Donald Trump unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he...
That's the most interesting thing about this VP pick, is if you look into his history, like, he has, like, shat on Donald Trump, like, numerous times in the past. So it makes you, like, wonder, like, what made, like, Trump decide that this was his guy? You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of a weird choice when you take that into consideration.
He could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice?
I mean, Trump's last VP was almost killed by his fanboys. Yeah, didn't they literally bring, like, what was it? Was it a, I don't remember, was it like a noose? Or was it a guillotine? It was a noose, wasn't it? Somebody correct me in chat, because I can't remember if it was like a guillotine or a noose. But they brought it and they were like screaming that it was like for Mike Pence. That shit was wild. I think it was a noose. Yeah, I think it was a noose as well. Either way, it's like, it's fucking insane. Like, MAGA Trump supporters are fucking unhinged on so many levels.
He needs to hear, and not just the advice he wants to hear. You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open.
Without throwing the chat says, but at least J.D. Vance has so many controversies to harvest and pick on, like calling Trump America's Hitler. I mean, he was kind of cooking right there, wasn't he? I mean, I'm obviously not a J.D. Vance fan, but he was kind of speaking the truth right there, wasn't he?
About the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong,
pretty damn close, if not like on point.
Media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record, but most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews, is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out to messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with them.
I feel like that, like, tariff shit is like, it's almost like you could always tell when, like, Trump has, like, learned a new word or whatever, right? And then, like, he just, like, spews it over and over and over again. I feel like he heard this, like, word mentioned by someone, and that's all him and his, like, VP can talk about. Fucking tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. Like, what the fuck, man?
Impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually...
They act like it's like this magic bullet that's going to solve, like, all problems in this country. Just tariff everything. you know?
Govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration, it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3.
You think Trump's going to like that, giving kudos to Joe Biden? Because we already seen him pop off on J.D. Vance. There was something in, the presidential debate that was kind of called out where I forget the specifics of it, but they were basically like, well, your VP, J.D. Vance, said this. And he's like, well, maybe he thinks that, but like, that's not me. Or I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but it was something along those lines where I talked about this last time, that it's kind of weird to see like a presidential candidate and their VP not being eye to eye on things. Like, I really feel like the two of them should be on the same page, you know? But yeah.
$3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says, you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion.
Trump's own wife isn't on the same page. You see that she's pro-life, allegedly, or pro-choice. No, I didn't hear about that. That's interesting. That's really interesting. I feel like Trump's the kind of person to, like, basically sit her down and have a conversation with her about that. Like, what are you doing? You're supposed to agree with me. You know what I mean? I feel like he's the type to get, like, really fucking mad about something like that, but I don't know. Anyway.
Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus.
Didn't she recently, I don't remember if it was like she did the interview already or she's going to be doing an interview where she kind of like talks about, Trump and like the upcoming election and whatnot. I can't remember if that's something that was going to happen or that it has already happened. Because maybe we should react to that on stream at some point.
Versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing.
Kevy.com says, ain't no one watch your stream, lil bro. You're watching it. You're watching it. You know what I'm saying? Oh, shit! Oh, shit! Oh, shit! That's something.
Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on It's a Beautiful Thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went.
Yeah, see, that's the biggest problem is it's like a lot of these people who, like, let's say they're pro-lifers, they don't think about how, like, these policies affect people in situations like that, where it's like for a medical reason, like you genuinely need an abortion or you're going to fucking die. And like, they don't consider the ramifications of what they're voting for when it comes to people like that. Like, this is so much more than just the way they would like to sell it to you is like, oh, like girls are just like going out there and fucking everything in sight. And, whenever they get pregnant, rather than like, using birth control or using like other forms of like contraceptive, oh, they're just like, oh, I'll just go get another abortion. I'll go get like my 20th abortion this year or some shit. Like, that's the way they like to, make people think that that's what's happening. When in reality, like, there's so many, like, valid reasons why somebody would need an abortion. It's not just, oh, I fucked a bunch of people and I got knocked up and now I need an abortion because I don't want it,
Went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when got asked about that, Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not what, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies.
Project 2025 got mentioned. Let's go.
Impossible to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate.
I think that like, I'm glad to see that that's getting mentioned like during both of the debates now, because like that really needs to be beaten to voters' heads right now. I know like Trump keeps trying to distance himself from Project 2025. I mean, it's bullshit. Like some of the policy positions that he's parroting come right out of the Project 2025 playbook. Not only that, but he's repeatedly praised the work of the Heritage Foundation, who is behind Project 2025. So, like, yeah, like him trying to get people to buy that he's not associated with this shit, it's just blatantly false, like on so many levels. But I do think that this needs to be beat into voters' heads repeatedly so they can better understand, like, the severity of how serious that shit is. Because, holy shit. Like, that could be a real game changer if, like, people start looking into that. Voters start looking into that.
Nate, access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about healthcare. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in healthcare for a reason. We trust women, we trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring.
I mean, I don't see how taking people's rights to make their own decisions over their own body is going to be the way that you gain people's trust on this issue. It's just not. You're basically deciding that the government can make a better decision over what someone does with their own body as opposed to their healthcare provider and themselves. Like, that's ridiculous. You're not gaining anybody's trust like that.
To do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big...
I don't understand the logic of that's what makes sense. Okay, we have a country and all these people live in this country. Yeah, they live in different states, but they live in the same fucking country. So let's like divide up the nation. So like, you know, you can get an abortion here, but if you live in this, state, sucks to suck. Like, what? That doesn't, I've never understood that. Their explanation of like, well, this is what makes the most sense to us. How? Like, you're just fucking over people who happen to like live in a state that their state says no, but like the state next door says yes. It's just like, it doesn't make sense. Okay, no matter how much you try to make it make sense, it doesn't make sense.
a very diverse and, let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked, and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance
it's really stupid.
that Amber Thurman
It's really
lived in
fucking
Minnesota,
stupid.
she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible.
But again, like, okay, I understand like what they're trying to say when they play the, oh, we're trying to be pro-family angle. They're talking about, because they'll tell you that people are like just killing babies or whatever. That's the way they see abortion, right? And like, I understand that that's the angle they're going with. But what about the people who need an abortion for a medical reason, right? You're potentially causing a lot of heartache for a family that already is in a bad spot because they have a situation where if they don't get an abortion, like they're already going to lose the baby, right? But you're making the situation so much worse because it's like, oh, yeah, we can't treat you because of the way the law works in the state that you're in. So, like, not only are you going to lose the baby, you're going to lose the mom, too. Like, wouldn't that be anti-family as well? Like, it's really dumb.
Because we've got to do a better job at that, and that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place.
Never thought of it being that way. As you're putting it, it's just pulling the plug on your loved one. With the abortion, I normally don't get into politics. Yeah, it's one of those things where like it's really fucked up if you really think about it. Like, because again, like when Republicans comment on this issue, they're only thinking about it like, oh, it's just people getting knocked up, and they're like, well, I don't want the baby, so I'm gonna kill it. That's the way they'd like you to believe it. And like maybe there are some people that do it that way, but like there are like genuine medical reasons why somebody may need to get an abortion or abortion-like treatments. And if you happen to be living in one of these states where they've outlawed it because of the fact that they overturned Roe v. Wade, like you're just fucked. Like, it's as simple as that.
To raise children. But these two things to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion. That's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator?
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was.
But under your policy, she'd be just as fucked as she was when she died. Like, don't you see that? Like, she would be just as fucked as she was, like, under your policies.
And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
Yeah, so far this debate isn't as eventful as the one with Kamala and, you know, Donald Trump. That one had like a lot more like noteworthy moments or whatever. This one is a lot more tame in comparison. But yeah, I do love that line. What the mind your own business? I mean, yeah, that's really the way it should be. I think the line, one of the lines that they've always used as well is the whole, like, you know, the government doesn't belong in the doctor's room with the patient and the doctor. And I think that that's true. You know, there's things like that the government has no business dictating what you do with your own body. But yeah.
Welcome back to the CBS News vice presidential debate. We want to turn now to America's gun violence epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Jeez. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels.
So he's not doing what Trump did with during Trump's debate. Like, he made everything kind of like go back to the border. But it doesn't surprise me that on this particular question, he resorts to, you know, making it about the border. Honestly, that seems to be their big play whenever the topic of the guns come up. Is like, well, you know, Kamala is allowing gun trafficking to come into the country through their border policy. Yeah.
That number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect
Yeah, they
our
make
kids?
everything about the border.
Is,
yeah.
and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school.
Because that's the only thing they give a fuck about right now. All they want to do is just mass deport a bunch of immigrants. Yeah. They made the hurricane into talking about the border. Wait, what? How the fuck do you make how do you make a hurricane about the border? What?
School that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball.
Oh, we're getting close to the part where they they really try to use this one against Tim Walz.
Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents.
Yeah, good point, Thorgard. What, America's importing guns? We make the fuckers? Yeah, like, most of the guns, like, we manufacture so many guns because of our, like, you know, our policies on guns. The fact that it's legal to own a firearm here. Like, yeah, like, what the fuck? That doesn't even make sense.
Parents. And they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead. And they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws.
Like here, I looked it up on Twitter, and I see Harris announces aid to hurricane victims can only get $750, but illegals are getting thousands each month being flown all around the U.S. and put in hotels. Ah, okay. I see the angle now. I see how they can make the hurricane about the border policy. Gotcha. That's fucking insane.
Enhanced background checks. And we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that work. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go? When we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said, actually, about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly, weird...
Yeah, there's a lot more civility between these two than there was with Kamala Harris and Trump. Granted, like a lot of the jabs were taken on Trump's part, and then Kamala just responded. But you know what I mean? Like, these two are being a lot more civil with each other than Trump was being with Kamala.
Weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland is, okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of...
That's why we're not getting a lot of the, clip-worthy moments out of this debate that we got out of, the one with Kamala and, Donald. There was just so many clip-worthy moments because a lot of it was just him coping about dumb shit.
Mental health abuse, or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters.
Here it comes.
I've seen it. Look, the NRA...
There it is. There's the line. This is the one they're using against him. Let me play that again. Listen closely to what he says here.
An assault weapons ban, but it only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA...
Okay, so if you didn't hear that, he kind of flubbed his words there, and he said, I've become friends with school shooters. Yeah, you see that, like, clipped out of context? That looks really fucking bad, obviously. But again, like I think anybody with like two functioning brain cells can understand like what he was trying to say there. Like if I had to guess, he was probably saying he was, became friends with the family members of victims of school shootings or whatever, something along those lines. But I won't lie, it's a pretty bad misspeak. But like clearly, like a lot of the people who are trying to run with that, they're trying to use it like in bad faith. But yeah.
NRA, I was NRA.
It's a bad misspeak, though. I won't lie.
Safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one, where the most.
It's because there was nothing they could pull out of it. Yeah, exactly. They got nothing on Tim Walz other than like literally everything that like they try to run with against Tim Walz is literally just him misspeaking about something. So, yeah.
Firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of...
And the tampon Tim thing, which anybody who is like a normal fucking person and not some unhinged MAGA freak doesn't give a fuck about that.
Of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues. Making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent.
Or lying, or what we call misremembering. Yeah, that's one thing that like frustrates me sometimes about like online communities as well, is like everybody's so quick to try and find like some gotcha on people that so many times like somebody will just like misremember something and that'll be used as like a gotcha. You're a Weasley little fucking liar. And it's like, no, I didn't remember how the situation played out, or I didn't remember what I said, like that sort of thing. Like, it's so crazy how quickly people jump to like, there's so many situations that could be attributed to ignorance rather than malice, but instantly, because it's the more interesting position to look at it as, it's more entertaining to assume malice. And so, yeah, that's the route that a lot of people go. It's really, really fucking annoying.
And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns, and there are things that you can do about it. But I do.
Yeah, that's because mental health is stigmatized due to people equating being mentally unstable to being violent. Yeah, there's still like, you would think that in like the current year, we'd have a better understanding of like mental health, and there's still so much stigma around it, and there's so much like that people don't understand. Yeah, I really wish people would take mental health more seriously.
I think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect the Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million.
That down payment assistance thing, that would help like a lot of people potentially that otherwise couldn't even dream of owning a home, like being able to own a home. Like, I can even talk like firsthand. Like, I'm somebody who was just like, oh, I'm perfectly happy just being a renter or whatever. But like with that, like if they actually pull that off, that down payment assistance thing would be huge. Like seriously, like you have no idea.
Million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the Vice President is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, one of the, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back, and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. Yeah. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting it.
Yeah, this is a drastic departure from, the Trump versus Harris debate, because like everything was like, just blame Kamala for everything. Just blame Joe Biden for everything. But like, this is like, hey, we can agree on this or we can agree on that. Like it's a huge difference compared to the last debate. It's pretty wild.
In millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign.
Doesn't have that level of authority right now.
Find the American
and you know they're being dishonest too, because like you know that they know that she doesn't have the authority to do that. But their goal here when they make these kind of like statements is like, oh, they'll put it into the heads of the voters that don't know any better. Well, hey, that's true. She's already an elected official. So like, why isn't she doing this now? Right? So they know better. When Trump and when, you know, JD Vance say this, they know exactly that she doesn't have any say in those kind of things right now. But if they can repeat it enough, voters that don't know any better will buy it. And that's the goal. That's the goal.
Dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens if you lower energy prices? As Donald Trump says, drill baby.
Dehumanizing immigrants by calling them illegal aliens. Yeah, I mean, it's just a dog whistle. I mean, it's always been a dog whistle.
Drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs aside from illegal immigration is, think about it. If a truck driver's paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, yeah. Governor, we will get to you in a moment. But Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for a national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where...
I love that. How he was just like, can I have that time then? Use every valuable second you can. That's hilarious.
Where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in
Well, of course, that's not true. And again, you have the facts. I guess we agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask.
You like that subtle call out? Because remember, JD Vance got mad about the fact checking earlier. I thought that was in the rules that you guys weren't going to fact check. You like that subtle jab of like, oh yeah, you know, the rule was that we're not supposed to fact check, but let me go ahead and fact check that for you right now. That was pretty slick.
Still on this question, are we going to drill and build houses?
He's basically like, you guys can't fact check, so let me do it for you.
Houses in the same federal land. And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these.
I can tell I'm distracted with the debate because I don't normally, I can't remember the last time I messed up that puzzle.
These things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build.
No evidence. So they didn't actually, the thing he said that they would post on social media, did they not actually post that? Genuinely curious.
Things and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans.
They were like, "Do you have a plan?" "I have concepts of a plan." I could not believe that when he said that. Like, how do you think that, like, because he still insists like he won that debate. That's the cope that he uses for like, oh, I don't have to debate her again. I already won that last debate, and then I destroyed Biden in my debate with him, so I don't need to do any more debates. But it's pure cope, all right? You made yourself look like a fucking idiot. And that's one of the reasons why you made yourself look like an idiot. You were specifically asked on the debate stage in front of millions of people watching this thing, what is your plan for healthcare? And you literally said, I don't have one. I have concepts of a plan. Like, it's insane. Cope, I heard cope. Fine.
You are coping.
You did indeed hear cope.
You just can't accept.
I have concepts of a plan.
Yes, you're coping and seething. The truth it is scalding, and now you are molding and coping so hard.
We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling.
Oh, my God.
Get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health.
Didn't answer the question. The question wasn't whether or not people with pre-existing conditions will be covered. The question was, will they pay more?
I almost got the story.
So it didn't really answer the question. But then again, you know what? I'm interjecting, so maybe he does. Okay. Give him a second.
Insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. I think it's very simple common sense. I think it's
rightfully so. If you are asking the American people, vote for me so I can get this job to run the country, and they ask you, okay, here's an issue that matters to the American people, all right? What is your plan to address this? And your answer is basically, you don't have one. You have concepts of a plan. Like, understandably, that's something that a lot of people are calling out. How are you going to ask, hey, let me run this country for you, and you don't have an answer for a very pressing issue for the American people? Like, it doesn't really... Of course they're going to call it out. What the fuck?
as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018.
It's not that difficult to, at the very least, say, this is my plan. This is what I would like to do. Now, is it possible that when you get into office, you might hit some roadblocks that prevent it from being possible? Yeah, sure. These things happen all the time. But having said that, like, this is just like cope right here. We got cope again because, like, it's not that difficult to say, this is what I plan to do. Okay. Not everything that somebody who's running for office as they plan to do is going to get done. That's an unfortunate reality, whether it's, they can't get, people to vote in favor of that decision or whatever the case may be. Sometimes they want to do things and they just don't get done for one reason or another. But it's not that difficult to say, hey, this is my plan for what I want to do. He didn't have an answer. It was just, I have concepts of a plan. That doesn't fucking work.
For the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better health care policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA, and the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley. 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants you. Go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing condition.
Hey, what's up, Gay Fesh? I'm doing good. How are you?
Too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator
Kojak in the chat says, Tipster, can I get that tip? You'd have to go through Mrs. Tippy first. All right? You'd have to get the go-ahead from her. Otherwise, that ain't happening, buddy. I'm sorry.
I'm going to come. Vance just explained might be worse than a concept because what he explained is pre-Obamacare.
Thank you.
And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure because guess what happens? You pay your premium. It's not much.
Huckleberry in the chat says you should dress up as Leon for Halloween. That would be sick. Look, I'm a fat fuck, okay? I couldn't pull off Leon. Now, maybe Robert Kendo. I think I can pull off a pretty decent Robert Kendo, because he's not as big as me, but he's a pretty, he's a little chonker. He's a bit of a chonker, so I think I could pull off a Robert Kendo, but there ain't no way I'm pulling off a Leon S. Kennedy. You got to be trolling with that one.
They figure they're not going to have to pay
We
out
do a
to
little
you.
trolling.
Those
It's
of
called
you
we
that
do a
are
little
older,
trolling.
gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace.
No matter RPD Leon for Halloween will be cool. You know what sucks is one time I tried to buy. There's a lot of like online retailers that'll sell these like hoodies that look like Leon's outfit from this game, right? And I bought one. I think I bought it on eBay or whatever, and the price was pretty reasonable. But the sizing wasn't right. It was like I think it was like Chinese sizing. Like, you know how their sizing works different than ours? So, like, it was, like, crazy small compared to, like, the sizing options in our country. So, it didn't fit. Like, it was, like, super duper duper fucking small. So, I was kind of bummed out. I had spent money on this, like, pretty badass hoodie, and it didn't fit me. But, whatever. That's what happens when you're a fat fuck. Don't become a fat fuck like me, okay? You won't have to worry about that. Yeah, their sizing is a lot different than ours. Yeah. And they didn't specify it on the listing. Like, I understand if, like, okay, different countries, different sizing, I get that, but, like, could you specify that on the listing? Like, come on.
Function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually...
But I love you as a fat fuck. I love you too, buddy.
Helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher. And he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And
there's just more of the tip to love. You have no idea how right you are about that. You'd have to ask Mrs. Tip for the deets.
I'm going to come.
Anyway.
Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what happens is...
So you think the individual mandate's a good idea?
I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret?
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of subjects to discuss. Margaret?
Let's talk about families in America. There is a child care crisis.
How much more of this is there? There's a little over 20 minutes. That's not too bad. Okay, sure.
In this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family and medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family and medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start, the family works better, we stay in their employers, we get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota, and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue, those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some places, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take care of our children or
welcome to the chat, Mr.
to
Cat.
get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think.
Are you playing Resident Evil while watching the debate? That's some great multitasking. I mean, when you do these kind of streams, you tend to get pretty good at that sort of thing. This isn't even the first time I've done this before. I've actually played games that I find to be like significantly more difficult than this game while watching debates. Like I played like Donkey Kong Country, for example, and some of the later stages can be really tough. So like watching a debate or something like that while like gaming, yeah, it's not that difficult. At least once you get the hang of doing it on stream. But yeah.
I think it makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between...
I mean, like, okay, but if like an employer was offering something like, you know, paid leave for like maternity leave or whatever, like... that's an option that's there for you. It doesn't mean you have to use it. Like my experience with like any employer who offers like paid maternity leave, like it's there for you to use if you want to use it, but nobody's forcing you to use it. Like, what? He's making it seem like it's like a requirement or whatever. Like you have to use it. It's like, no, not necessarily. You don't have to use it. It's an option, you know? But yeah.
Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach.
So if you happen to be one of those people that's like, yeah, you know, I just had a kid or whatever, you know, I took like a week off to like deal with, you know, all the recovery after like the birth process or whatever, or however long that takes. But like, I want to go back to work. Like I actually enjoy work and I want to, okay, fine, go back to work. Like there's nothing stopping you just because you're like employer, like whether they're choosing to provide that or like by law, they're required to provide that. There's nothing forcing you to take them up on that. Like you can, okay, fuck it. I don't want to use it, so I'm just going to go to work. Like, what?
Approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of childcare model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with childcare. Maybe
it's usually 2 to 3 weeks. Well, as you can tell, I would not be capable of getting pregnant. So, yeah, I just was kind of taking a shot in the dark there. Man, I can't imagine going back to work after 1 week. Yeah, that's, for sure. Sounds pretty fucking insane. But you have no idea. Like, some people, they're like workaholics, and like I remember my grandfather was such a workaholic that like he had like a serious injury on the job, and he was like, when can I come back to work? It's like, bro, you literally just got hurt. Like, what the fuck? Take some time off and recover a bit. Jesus.
You live in a rural area or an urban area, and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide childcare in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote childcare, because look, it is unacceptable. And, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents...
I believe if you're a teacher, it's 3 months. I forget how long it is for like my employer. Because I know like one of my coworkers, he took advantage of it. He used it, which is great. Like, a lot of employers, they don't provide it for men. It's usually just women, but like they provide it for men as well at my employer. So like that was kind of nice for him, but I don't remember how long it was. Yeah, for men, that's great. Yeah, like, so if you're like a father who wants to be very much involved in like the early months or the, right after the birthing of your child, like you can do that. Tippy killed the swamp puppy. Yeah, this is true.
Will spend nearly as much on childcare as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said...
It's so important for men to also get... Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just as important for, a father to be involved in the early development of their child as much as it is the mother. So yeah, absolutely.
As much as childcare is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking...
I was bragging about my multitasking capabilities earlier, and I fucked up to where I have to backtrack now. I got a little bit too cocky for my own good.
In a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies.
Sounds like a skill issue. You try to do this shit, dopamine. I want to see you react to, and like actually react, not just have the video playing in the corner like some streamers do while they like play a video game or something. Like actually react to a debate or like some kind of like topic that you're looking at while playing a video game. Let's see if you could fucking do it and then call it a skill issue, all right?
Oh shit! Oh shit!
Bruh.
In the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're...
I love you, dopamine. I love you.
Going to be able to provide paid family leave, childcare options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the childcare shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money.
But you're supposed to be a professional? Professional my fucking ass. I can't even properly light my streams. What the fuck?
We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and This is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarship types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that.
That's why Kamala was referring to it as a sales tax. It's not a literal sales tax, but the way it's going to drive up the cost of all the goods, it might as well be. Exactly.
They're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School.
I'm glad to see that he's actually clarifying that because, like, again, the reason why they play the whole tariffs game is because somebody who doesn't know any better, they look at that and they're like, oh, wow, you know, so these importers of goods, they have to pay the taxes, not me. And it's like, well, you're going to pay it on the back end. Those costs, those increase in cost to import the goods here, that cost is going to trickle down to you. It's going to result in, like, higher costs of goods. So I'm really, really glad to see that Tim Walz kind of, like, emphasized that so people can get a better understanding of that.
Well, that's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy's growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state.
Why is the right so against human rights? Because they've got big business in their pockets. All right. They got big business in their pockets, and they know that, like, they're just looking to benefit those businesses. That's what it comes down to, you know. Fuck any, like, rights to, like, the people. You know, if it can benefit their bottom line, then they don't give a fuck about any of that shit.
State of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results.
The only time they pretend to give a damn is they know that if they take the wrong position on a particular issue, that it's a losing issue for them and it won't get them elected. But otherwise, for the most part, like, their decisions are based off of, you know, how can I line my pockets by sucking off these big businesses.
Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal.
Rightfully so.
Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies.
So you're not going to
make
answer the
housing
question.
affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president, Donald Trump left the White House, and now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a...
He's making it seem like it was like a peaceful transition. It totally was not. What the fuck, dude? Like, everybody saw that shit. It happened on national fucking television. Like, what the fuck, bro? Holy shit.
Threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation.
Yo, Mr. Cat, true.
Nice argument. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Fucking true.
I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged.
I was literally just thinking that, Miss Gender Lynn. That's not something to be proud of. That guy literally had fucking, like, okay, a lot of times you'll hear like people on the left refer to like people on the right as like, oh, they have brainworms or whatever. No, this guy literally had fucking brainworms. Like that's an actual thing that he had. Like, holy shit. Why would you be proud to get an endorsement from that fucking guy? What the fuck?
Engaged in censorship at an industrial scale.
Oh shit! I didn't mean to push that button. He drove around with a whale's head on his car. Yeah, he's not normal. Wasn't there like a story about like a bear as well? Like him like having like a dead bear in like the trunk of his car or some shit? He's just a weird fucking dude.
COVID, she's done it over a number of other issues, and that to me is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here, and I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this. And the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers.
If you ask him today, he will still give the same answer, that he didn't lose. He fucking did. And he's just the biggest, like, crybaby, like, sore loser on the fucking planet. You lost, fair and square. Like, but he just can't admit it. Like, what the fuck? I don't know. Just, like, I actually legitimately wonder what the fuck's gonna happen if he loses again. Like, it's gonna be a shit show.
Were beaten at the Capitol that day. Some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. Yeah. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences.
Yeah, he's trying to rally the troops. He's trying to get people all worked up again so that, you know, if he loses again, he can pull that shit again. Round 2. Like, that's literally what it is.
Is at the ballot box.
He knows what the fuck he's
doing.
doing.
When we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really...
Does this get the JD, the coping song? Look, we've already done the coping song like 2 or 3 times now. Okay, we got to give the coping song a break, all right?
Rich, for Democratic leaders...
I get that there's lots of coping going on, but like, let's give it a break, okay?
...to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we'll win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president. He'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it.
Oh, you're a lot better than your running mate.
Democrats,
you're a hell of a lot better than your running mate.
Hillary Clinton in 2016
he ain't doing that shit.
Said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up.
Yeah. It's always funny that, like, the anti-censorship people, like, it's only anti-censorship when it comes to the things that they care about, right? But then it's like, oh, you know, you want to talk about, like, books that, you know, talk about queer issues and stuff like that. We need to ban those. Oh, you want to talk about books that, you know, talk about, like, gender issues and stuff like that. Oh, we need to ban that stuff. Like, so they don't give a fuck about censorship. They're not, like, actually about free speech. It's just free speech for us, but not for you guys over there. You guys are just fucked. Like, come on.
For everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank.
Yeah, that was a good point.
I think this is the conversation they want to hear, and I think there's a lot of agreement. But this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had.
Also, Jan 6 was a violent riot full of MAGA extremists and white supremacists. Yeah, like literally. Like the worst of the worst people were there doing that shit.
Not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damn...
Jesus Christ, Daisy Ferret. Disavow. Dis-a-fucking vow.
Oh, shit.
Holy shit. Does them hating LGBT rights mean it's censorship? No, but like they'll ban like books and stuff like that speak in favor of like LGBTQ issues. That's the point that I was making there. So like they're anti-censorship unless it's in regards to like, you know, books that talk about stuff that they don't believe in or stuff like that. Yeah.
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook.
Yeah, the point of it is that, like, you know, just because you have like the freedom of speech, it doesn't negate like freedom of consequences for your actions. I actually think the whole like, you know, yelling fire in a crowded theater thing is like a good example, right? Like, do you have like, can you say that? Sure, you can yell fire in a crowded theater, but if you do that, like, you're gonna suffer some consequences for it. Okay, so like, freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of consequence. Okay, that's just a reality.
For saying that toddlers shouldn't
Senator,
wear
the
masks.
governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah, well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this, I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate.
Mm-hmm.
It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage.
Yeah.
What I'm concerned about is where is the...
That's why he's not the VP pick again, because he didn't do what Donald wanted him to do. Like, that's facts right there. That is 100% facts right there.
Firewall with Donald Trump. Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up?
Yeah, exactly, Miss Genderlin. And Donald almost got him killed. Literally, he had like a mob of people raging, like literally saying that they wanted to hang the fucking guy. Like, holy shit.
You keep your oath of office, even if...
Imagine putting your own VP's life in danger just because you're a sore fucking loser.
The president doesn't. And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that. Because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News vice presidential debate continues.
All right, let's go ahead and let's skip to the next part. Let's see. We're almost done here, actually. There's only a little... I think there's only enough left for, like, the closing statements or whatever. So here we go. There we go. Is it playing? Yeah, it is. Okay.
Welcome back to the CBS News vice presidential debate. It is now time for the closing statement. Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So, Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything.
They got that Taylor endorsement, yo.
Oh, shit. Oh,
they got that Taylor endorsement.
Everything.
Wasn't Trump like coping on Truth Social about how he hated like Taylor Swift because of that endorsement? Like, he's literally such a sore loser that he's mad at like some celebrity who has like pretty much no say in politics because they endorsed like their candidate, the person they want to vote for. And he was like, I hate Taylor Swift on like Truth Social. It was so funny.
But they are truly...
You know what? I'll give you guys a coping for that one.
You are coping and seething.
I'll give you guys a coping for that one.
Accept what you're seeing. Yes, you're coping and seething. The truth it is scalding, and now you are molding and coping so hard.
I did everything right and they indicted me.
There we go. I'll give you a coping and seething for that one. I mean, the Swifties are actually politically measurable. When she told people to register to vote, there was a surge in like 300K registrations. I mean, damn, that's, you know what? We got to give a round of applause for that. Holy shit. Trump fakes Taylor's support before she stated the truth. Damn. Dang. He was hoping for that. And let's be honest, he was never going to get that endorsement. That was never going to fucking happen. But yeah.
Optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. What we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that, too, has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does.
Like I said, they're pushing really hard that whole blaming Kamala for the current state of affairs.
All these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change.
Harris has become their new Obama. I mean, I've talked about that before, like how I haven't seen this much excitement in a political, like a presidential candidate since Obama. Like there seems to be that same level of excitement behind Kamala Harris right now. So hopefully she gets the win. It seems like she has a pretty good chance right now, but yeah, hopefully she gets the win.
Change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I think
it's pretty insane that anybody can say that Trump did anything well during his presidency, but okay.
I want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. Please get out and vote. And for all of us here at CBS News, thank you and good night.
Okay, so, I mean, that debate was honestly kind of mid. It was like they really softballed each other on a lot of things. Like I said, it wasn't as eventful as, like, obviously the debate between, like, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. I don't anticipate, well, actually, I shouldn't say I don't anticipate, because I've already pretty much seen, like, the polling results of the debate or whatever. I don't anticipate this particular debate is going to, like, swing the needle any further in any specific direction or whatever, but, I don't know, it was alright. For what it was alright, but nothing super noteworthy like, the last one. So, but that's just my thoughts on it.